June is one of the most productive months in our garden. We've got all kinds of crops that are coming off from our cool season vegetables, and our warm season crops are starting to set fruit as well. I've got some carrots here that we've just harvested, and I'd like to show you some of the varieties here that we've planted. This first one here is called cantaloupe, and actually it's a different shaped carrot because it's a more round shape, and this is really more characteristic. We've let these get a little bit more woody on us, and again, it's more of a decorative type thing, but they're still very tasty. And we'll compare that to some of these that we're going to harvest here that are called orbit. And again, they're just a little lighter color, but they still have that different shape, which kind of makes a nice little conversation piece, and it's a lot of fun. And these are real tasty again and real sweet. Now another one that isn't ready yet, but I want to show you, is called Afghan purple. And again, it's going to be our traditional lawn carrot that we're used to seeing, but it's going to be purple in color. But I just wanted to show you that purple color and see how it's coming along. And sometimes you'll see them split like this, and a lot of times that's from a rocky soil or something that has damaged the growing point, so they'll start to spread out a little bit. But we'll see how those come along. We've also harvested some of our kohlrabi, and we've got a large one here and a few more, and Barb will probably give us some tips sometime during the summer on how to prepare that, as well as our red cabbage. That's our last one. And our onions, we pull a few of those as they size up just for in the kitchen for fresh use, but really we are a few days or even a few weeks away before we'll harvest them. And again, that's a show that we'll do for you and talk to you about harvesting onions. Our potatoes, I'd like to show you how they're coming along. We've had a lot of calls this year about how viney people's foliage is, and we really have a lot of foliage here. It's starting to fall out of the bed even. And really the reason for that is this year we had such a mild spring, and when we side dressed them, we just got a lot of top growth. And we're not really sure what kind of production we'll get. It may be down a little bit because of all the top growth. But we've also had an awful lot of rain that is washing the potatoes off. And that's something you need to do, is be sure and be on top of that and check them. Now, Alan, our extension assistant, uses a term called grubbing, and that's really something that you can do throughout this period, is just dig in there and check and see what you can find and see what size they are. And one way to check is rub on the outside, and if the skin is really still loose, you probably need to leave them a little bit longer. And of course you can tell by the size how big they're going to be as well. This particular variety is red Pontiac. But you notice we've got a thermometer in here, and that's really something that's good to have in the garden. When the temperature of the soil starts to get up around 90 degrees, then it's starting to get iffy as whether or not you should harvest your potatoes, and usually that's done sometime in the month of June. If the temperature is 90 degrees, it can start to heat and damage the potatoes. So watch the soil temperature. That's another good way to check and see how they're coming along. But once you start to harvest the potatoes, if you get any of the small ones like this at the time that you're harvesting, keep those in the refrigerator at 50 degrees. And use those as your seed potatoes for the fall planting, which some people have a lot of success for. And you would plant the entire potato. You wouldn't want to cut them in pieces like you do for the spring planting. Again, that's a little tip, because sometimes during the summer, late summer, when we plant fall potatoes, it's hard to find the seed pieces. But if they're not ready for you yet, make sure that you go in and cover those back up as you're stealing from them, because they need to be covered with soil, and after all the rain, it's really crucial to get those covered up again. And then here's one I want to show you that's turned a green color, and that's because the soil has washed off from it, and it's called solanine, and it's just a poison that gets in there and causes it to turn green because it's exposed to the light. Now this particular one we wouldn't want to eat because the entire potato is green, but if you get a large potato with just part of it, cut that part off and pitch it, and eat the rest of it, because it's still okay to eat. And sometimes just in storage in the grocery store, exposed to the light, they'll turn that green color as well. Now it has caused some poisoning problems in some humans, but it's usually when they eat larger quantities, so it's something to be aware of. And then of course in a few weeks when the potatoes are ready, we'll use our fork here to dig. And one thing you want to be careful with when you dig them is that you get to the side and loosen the soil, because you can damage some, and those would be the ones you want to eat first. The rest of them you want to leave out where they'll cure a little bit and dry, probably a couple of 3 weeks, maybe under a shade tree or something. If you leave them outside in the sun, again, they'll turn green and can get damaged. And then you want to store them in where it's a little bit humid, temperatures around 70, 75, 80 degrees. So we're real pleased with how the potatoes are coming, but we may be disappointed because of all this foliage and not get as much as we normally would. Now our vine crops are coming along quite well too, and we need to take a look and see how they're doing and give them a little bit of attention as well. Well, our watermelons are starting to bloom and set fruit already, and we need to come in and do a little bit of maintenance with them. They've been vining for quite a while, and now that they're setting fruit, the wind is blowing them off of our raised beds. So what we're going to do is just come in and lay them across the top, and we're using just some old clothes hangers that we've cut up into little pieces of wire, and then we'll just tack those to kind of keep them from rolling off the top. Now we'll just go along, and we want them all to run along the raised bed because we need that foliage to help shade out the plastic so it doesn't get too hot during the summer. And we'll do that all up and down the row. And you can see this is our Golden Crown, one of the new varieties that we're trying, which has already set some fruit, and it has a yellowish cast to it. And again, it's real important for us to get that plastic covered up. If you don't get the vines over it, you'll need to come back with another type of mulch. And we've put in some wheat straw in between the beds that could be used on the top, and ours is starting to germinate. And we'll either mow that down or come in with some type of a herbicide to kill it out just so it'll look a little bit more presentable. Let's look now at some of our other vine crops. Our cantaloupes here, we've got about 4 different varieties. They're starting to vine, so that means it's time to side dress, and we'll show you right here how to do that. Now this variety is one of our space-saving varieties that we've been talking about on the show. And note that the internodes are real short, so it's very compact. And again, they're just starting to run, and so that means it's time for that first application of side dressing. And you don't want more than about a tablespoon per plant, and you can broadcast that around in between the plant and try to keep it off the foliage. If you get it on, knock some of the fertilizer off. It won't take much to give it a boost to get it going, and if we over-fertilize, chances are we're going to get too many viney runners and too much vine growth again, so we want to keep from doing that. The last one I want to show you is our cucumbers, and again, they're just starting to run on us, so we'll side dress them too, but we're going to grow all of our cucumbers this year up on trellises, even our space-saving variety. And we just used some hog wire and different concrete reinforcement wire, different heights depending on our variety. And we're using some electrical fence posts here, and there's several different kinds. This is rebar, this one over here, and it runs about $1. This one is more of a fiberglass, and it's about $1.50. And of course you can buy just rebar by itself and cut it into lengths, maybe a little bit cheaper. And we've just driven those in through the wire to hold them up from our windy conditions. Well, now let's go look over at our corn and see how it's coming along. Our corn is really responding to all the rain that we've had and that first application of side dressing that we put on of nitrogen when it was about 1 foot high. And we won't come back and side dress it until it starts to tassel and silk on us. But you can tell with our Oklahoma winds, we've got a little bit of damage. We had a nice little storm too, and they've blown the corn over, and of course we planted the corn to try to prevent this problem from occurring. We planted the deep trellis, put the seed in pretty deep. As it germinated, started to grow, we put the soil over it, but we went with about 1.5 weeks, right during the time that we needed to put some more soil on it, where we had a lot of rain and we couldn't even get in here to cover it. So we didn't get it covered as high as we wanted to, and sure enough, the wind has blown it over. But don't let that discourage you. Just come in and try to pull up as much excess soil as you can from each side. And of course, as windy as it is today, it may be a little hard to get it, but just pat that down and put up as much as you can, because the corn will send out adventitious roots just like this along the stem, and we'll be able to salvage it unless it breaks it off. So again, we'll show you how the production comes on it, because we've got some interesting varieties we want to talk about later on in the season.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.